You should know me well enough by now. My stories never have happy endings.
So sorry. I have something for you, darling.
Hello, it's Lisa here from Lisa Loves Channel doing a review for Geek Legion of Doom for you today. And today I'm going to be reviewing a new horror anthology movie that is due for release in January 2019 by the name of Terror Tales. I'm just going to read a little bit from something I've got written down to give you a taste or an idea of what's been put forward. What was the first thing I read about this one? So here we go. This brings together cast from Friday the 13th, Maniac Cop 1 and 2, The Crazies, People Under the Stairs, Sleepaway Camp and Critters 2, amongst others might I add. This one does have a pretty impressive cast. I will give you some of the names now that you may recognise. I'm not going to sit and tell you who's in what movie and who they play because this review would be very long and very boring, so just let me give you a very quick list of names you may recognise, and there are many more along with this, but here's a few for you to start off with. So we have got Jennifer Runyon, Ellen Uddy, Felicia Rose, Ian Birch, Lauren Langdon, Ari Lehman and Lynn Lowry. I'm sure you recognised a few names from there. If you didn't, shame on you for your horror knowledge. So this one was actually written and directed by Jimmy Lee Coombs. He has done a little bit in the past, but this seems to be one of his first main full-length features. From watching a couple of interviews, there is actually a second anthology that's been written, so if you like this one, there is something more to look forward to. So what can I tell you about the stories within this movie? Right, so this movie has got 3 individual stories and of course the wraparound story, or sorry, the story that ties everything together. This is very much done in an old school formula, Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Dark Side, that kind of thing. We have the equivalent of the Crypt Keeper in this movie also. So the wraparound story follows a psychopath who is driving a young man who suddenly awakens. His name is Michael. This man tells him, "I've got your wife and daughter in the trailer attached to this truck. At the push of a button I can poison them with this lethal toxin that is set to go off in the trailer, so you must do everything I tell you to." And he proceeds to regale Michael with 3 horrifying stories, which he sits, complies, listens, does as he's told. He's a good boy. And the stories which follow are obviously the anthology that we're getting. The director did say this was very much purposely filmed in that old school format of the Crypt Keeper telling the stories. The second one, he did say, hopefully if that goes into production, it will be more the sort of interconnecting, weaving stories that somehow all tie together in some way. So I'll give you a very, very brief synopsis of each story. Obviously I don't want to go into a lot of detail. I don't want to tell you what happens in any great regard because that's going to spoil the story. So the first story is called By Proxy. It follows a burnt out author who her son commits suicide. She is facing trial for her son's death. And a demon comes forth to basically let her into the truth behind her son's death and what actually happened. Well, I'll sit and give you an idea of what I thought of each individual story. The acting in this by the main actress was very, very good. She's obviously a very accomplished actress. The story was decent enough. There were little bits that were very cheesy. There was little bits with the son and his father around the kitchen table playing, which was a bit just didn't ring true. The demon in this, something I did like about these different stories in this movie is they do as much as possible rely on practical effects. Any real horror fan will obviously have an appreciation for that. They do use CGI, but it's used sparingly and only when needed, which obviously you guys know my thoughts on CGI. If it's not great, don't use it. They do use a bit of CGI in this one that is very interesting. It's something I haven't seen before and I do think it was actually pretty effective. The practical effects, for the most part, are very good. They were actually done by Kevin Ward, who worked on season 9 of the sci-fi programme Face Off. If you watch that, I myself haven't seen it, but I'm sure that will mean something to some of you out there. The demon in this was bits of him I liked, bits I wasn't so keen on. There was certain effects which were done with the demon outside, which I wasn't very keen of. I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but for the most part the effects were managed pretty fine for this one. The next story is, it speaks my language. This is in an 80s video store. I actually used to manage a video store. It was an Irish Blockbuster also that I used to manage. We do cover that here. Obviously not as long ago as the 80s, but I remember as a child very fondly going to video stores with my dad in the 80s, hunting out all those horrors on the shelves, all those creepy covers. They actually have a set here from an 80s video store. So this story is called Radical Video. And this follows a detective who is on the hunt for a killer known as Sledgehammer, who is terrorizing the owners of this video store. I love the setting for this. I do think they did achieve that sort of very 80s sort of magical nirvana of the old video store that we used to love going into. The story itself is very effective. There are, I think the effects in this one would be my favourite. There are some pretty brutal effects in here which were quite impressive, I have to say. Obviously taken into consideration this isn't a blockbuster with millions of pound budget. It's not going to have the effects that you're used to seeing in Steven Spielberg movies, you know, but really good basic practical effects here, very well done. The only complaint I would have in that respect is I want more blood. There are certain scenes regarding the Sledgehammer. I won't go into loads of detail. I think it would have been more believable to see a bit more blood in that specific scene. If you've seen it, I'm sure you know what one I'm talking about. But yeah, pretty effective. Acting was pretty solid. So yeah, this one did bring back nostalgic thoughts to me from my time working in the video store and my time as a child going into video stores. And I did feel the story was pretty engaging. The performances, although not as good as the performance of the lady in the first story, I did feel that the performances were pretty believable here. Nobody stood out as being glaringly awful. So, and I think usually when you watch independent movies that can happen a lot, but in this case it didn't. So that is story 2. Right, so the third story of the lot here is called Epidemic, and this one takes a pretty novel look at possession. A evil deity from many years ago takes possession of a human body as a host, and when he uses that body for his fill, when it's destroyed, which is what happens, and rather nastily might I add, he just jumps on and uses a different body to get on with it. There are some pretty brutal effects in this also, which are quite eyebrow raising. I do like my gore, I do like quite unusual effects, I like quite novel looks at things, and this one does offer that. It's quite a novel look at the possession genre. It just looks at it from a completely different angle, and a quite gory angle that we don't normally see, which I was pleasantly surprised by, so that gets a thumbs up from me, I have to say. So this segment of the movie has a lot to do with trust. Nobody knows who they can quite trust in this. This demon has moved from one person to another and has left the previous host in a pretty damn awful state, it has to be said. So it's well worth watching for that reason alone. So yeah, all in all, I do think this was a pretty positive attempt at an anthology. It's very much done in an old school style. I think anyone that has been watching horror for a lot of years will notice that right away, and that is purposeful. That's not done, that's not, you know, it's not old-fashioned in its style. It deliberately does this for the writer and director's love of that old genre. And I remember all those kind of movies, and you know, it did appeal to me. I think for a younger audience, that haven't experienced these kind of anthologies, it may feel a bit dated. As I say, the effects, while I felt they were effective, can you say that? The effects were effective. Obviously there's a budget in the movie. It's not a massive budget. There are little bits that could be better, but you know, who am I kidding? I couldn't do any better. So yeah, they were pretty good for the most part. There was a few little bits that I felt I wasn't keen on, but more often than not, they were better rather than bad, if that makes sense. So yeah, for me, I feel the director's done a pretty decent job here. Obviously he wrote and directed this. The actors put in pretty believable performances. There are a few cringe-worthy moments that did stand out as a bit, oh, I wouldn't have put that in. But you know, you're not going to appeal 100% to every person. That could just be down to personal taste. I do feel the effects were well managed. I very much applaud the use of practical effects for an independent movie. Most independent movie makers of the day do tend to go down that CGI route, which when you don't have a mammoth budget, even when you do have a mammoth budget, they can look naff. But when you do not have a mammoth budget and you use CGI, the chances are it's going to be bad. The one use of CGI, well, there were more than one use of CGI in this, but the one main one that stands out to me in this is something I haven't seen before. I thought it was well done. I thought it was effective. And it didn't make me cringe and think, oh my god, why have they done this? And so many times I watch movies that are okay, they're not too bad, and then they do something with CGI that just makes me just lose the will to live. And that didn't happen in this movie. There was a couple of little bits, mainly in the first segment here, with regards to the demon, that I wasn't over keen on, but you know, that can be forgiven for the use of practical effects in a modern movie, which is a rarity these days and one to be applauded. So I would say a pretty satisfactory item for this one. I will be interested to see if another anthology tale does come forth from this director. He did say in an interview that he had written one and it was more of an interconnecting story one, so I will definitely be interested in seeing that one. So let me know below your thoughts. Does it sound like something you'd enjoy? Now, this one isn't actually due for release until January, so I don't know if any of you out there will have seen it. If you have, let me know below in the comments what you thought. For this one, to give a score out of 10, I will give this one a... let's come in at a 6. That's a pretty good average score, enjoyable. It wasn't something that I loved, but it's something that I had the admiration for what they achieved, what they set out to achieve, and I will check out the director's following work from this one. So let me know in the comments what you think, and I look forward to speaking to you next time.